lovely friends, and welcome to what is apparently the most controversial video on BookTube. And yet also the one that gets the most views every year. This is your fair warning that if you can't handle people shit-talking books, just keep scrolling. So the good news about my reading year for 2023 is that I did not read any books that absolutely enraged me. There were no 1 stars. There were no popular books that are going to get me unfollowed by several subscribers because they can't handle me not liking their fave. The bad news is that I've been a bad booktuber and I don't have a lot of notes about any of these books. So you read the title, you've seen the thumbnail. This is going to be me talking about the books that are, in my personal opinion, my least favorite books of the year. Some of these are here because I don't think they're well written. Some of these are here because I was built up and they just let me down, and some of them are here because I was built up and they let me down and I don't understand the writing choices either. Normally I would link all of the wrap-ups where I talked about these books down below. If those wrap-ups do not exist, because I didn't do any wrap-ups for 2023. However, there are a few of them that are on vlogs, so I will have those vlogs linked down in the description box. Disclaimer, this is my personal opinion. These are just books that did not work for me. This list, as with my best of list, no particular order except for the last 3. Also, I did not have a top 10. I've actually been pretty good the last few years about picking books that I think I will like. You'll find that I was not as good this year, hence why there's more books on this list than there were last year. It is what it is. We're going to start with a book that it breaks my heart that is on this list because it's one of my favorite authors. However, I also recognize that this author and I do not always have the same taste when it comes to what I think is a good ending. One of my favorite series of all time is by this author. I also have deeply disliked some of this author's work, and that author is V.E. Schwab. I read Galant finally for the first time this year. I gave this 3 stars. It was okay. I've been meaning to read it, but I've been kind of uncertain. I felt like maybe this had a little bit Darker Shade of Magic vibes, which is, I love that series so much. But I also know that like some of her historical stuff, more like Addie LaRue, hasn't worked for me just because she's not someone who always does the kinds of endings that I like. I don't want to get into why I didn't like this ending, but I also understand why the ending was this way. It was okay. If you like V.E. Schwab's writing style, and if you like the kinds of characters, especially the kinds of female characters that she writes, because that is a decent critique of her that she always writes the same female character, but like, I identify with that type of character, so I have no problem reading that character, especially when you have reasons for, like this is sounding like a defense of the book, I know. We're following Olivia Pryor, and she's grown up in an orphanage. It is the, does it tell you where she is? She grows up in what is basically considered a home for troubled girls. It is a boarding school for girls that cannot fit in at another boarding school, for girls who have no family to send them. She was left on the doorstep of this boarding school as a child. So basically, what it really is an orphanage. This is pseudo-historical. It's not any decided place and time. It just kind of exists. But it gives me like 1930s, 1940s, like Secret Garden, Little Princess, that kind of historical era vibe with a little bit of Narnia thrown in. That's what we're dealing with. We've got 2 parallel worlds. Basically, Olivia gets this letter from a man claiming to be her uncle saying, hey, like, I've been looking for you for years and please come to our family home. We want to bring you in. We want to welcome you in. She shows up at this family home and no one is expecting her. And it turns out her uncle died a year ago. From there, she ends up digging into some of the mysteries of the house. I will note, and I do not know how well this was done, but Olivia is mute, so she does a lot of her communication in sign language, and then there's this really interesting way she learns to communicate with her cousin who he's not able to sign. There's only one person there that can sign, but he has dyslexia, and so what she ends up doing is because she's an artist, she starts using drawings to communicate with. Again, I don't know how well it was done, but it was nice to kind of see her problem solving and see how smart this character was, despite people continually underestimating her because of her disability. That said, I don't know, the writing style was a big plus for me, but I was expecting to love this more, I guess is what it comes down to. I was expecting to love this more. I was expecting to have a more fulfilling ending, and like the way that this book ends off, I don't know that it's bleak, but it's just kind of depressing. That's all I can say about it. Like, I can't tell you why I don't like it without spoiling things. I did read this for a vlog. It was the last book I read of the year, and like, to end your year on a book that you only kind of thought was okay, that says something about my 2023. This, as with all of the books on this list, actually, I think there's a reader out there. I think there are people out there that are going to like it. I just was not wowed. with it, and it didn't quite scratch the itch that I've been feeling since I finished Darker Shade of Magic. Like, I haven't quite had that magical moment with any of E. Schwab's books since. Moving on, here is another one that I read for a vlog. It actually is in the vlog that I did for where I read 3 blue books to see if I was going to keep any of them, and the answer is no, I'm not keeping this one, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This is about a witch. Her name is Diana. Her name is Diana. I would say that tells you something about the main character, but I'm just bad at names in general when it comes to main characters. So that's not on the author. That's a me problem. This is very obviously written in response, or at least it very much feels like it was written in response to Twilight and the fact that Twilight is this, like, 117-year-old vampire crushing on a teenager. In this case, that dynamic works a lot better because I believe Diana is in, like, her late 20s, her, like, early 30s. She is set in her career, all of those things. What's going on is Diana has fully distanced herself from her magical past. She is a witch. She is able to do magic, but she has chosen not to. She has a lot of trauma involving that, and so she's chosen just not to embrace her witchiness and is trying to just be a normal academic. She ends up in her studies accessing a book that is magicked, and she is the only person who has ever been, or has been able to access this book in a while. And so all of a sudden she has all of these paranormal demons, vampires, other witches trying to get her to access this book and, like, creeping up on her. And she ends up drawing the attention of a vampire named Matthew. I will say their relationship actually did work for me. A lot of why this book is on this list has to do with, like, just choices that were made in what was included that just squicked me out. We went places that we didn't need to go. I didn't need that book to go. I was having a very good, fun, interesting time, and then, like, there's so much purring. I don't understand. He's a vampire. Why is he purring? That's the big thing. And then there's this whole, that spoils things, so I can't talk to you, but there's, like, this whole conversation where I'm like, I feel like this is a conversation that they should have had instead of just vaguely his family who only speaks French hints at. Like, at least his mom could have said something. It's very, like, that whole, like, I don't know. I don't even remember how his mom is still alive, if she's really his mom. I don't remember any of that. There is parts of this that I did genuinely find intriguing and I thought were really well done. The writing is solid. The characterization is solid. In execution, there were a few ideas in here that I just went, why? I think I ended up giving this 3 stars. I have a lot more in-depth and detailed thoughts that are probably slightly spoilery in my vlog, which again will be linked down below in the description. I also know stuff about things that happen later in the series that makes me think that I probably will not continue on with it, just because we do get into some eugenics territory. I have 146 books on my physical TBR. If I'm going to be reading books with that stuff in it, it's going to be getting something off of that physical TBR. I'm realizing that every single one of these books on this list is in a vlog. So, like, good on me, I guess. Moving on from there, we have A Song for the Void by Andrew Piazza. This was pretty decently written. It was solidly written. It was, it's a historical horror set in China around the time where we're making the switch over from the East India Trading Company to the British Empire kind of taking over China. It is around between the first Opium War and the second Opium War. And I went into this knowing a bit about the British presence in China, knowing a bit about, like, what all they did, and so it's frustrating because this is historical fiction, so obviously there's, like, only so much of the modern lens and modern knowledge of things that you can put in here. But specifically, I just thought that there were things that were not handled well when you are a white author writing about a time, writing about colonization is what he's writing about. This one, we're following a character, I don't remember his name, it's on my Kindle. We're following a character, he is a doctor, and he is dealing with an opium, or he is recovering from an opium addiction, and so he's been conscripted by a friend back into the military, and he is on the ship as they are trying to, like, they're hunting down pirates that are smuggling opium, and they get a really weird batch of opium or something, and people start experiencing hallucinations and things like that. So this is a book that I probably would not have picked up if it had not been for a project, just because, again, the things that I was worried about him not handling well, I don't feel that they weren't handled well in the context of this story. For one thing, I do think that when you are a white author, there are so many ways you can get around using derogatory language, even when it's historically accurate. So many ways you can get around using derogatory language for people of color. Like, obviously you're going to see the racism, especially because we're dealing with the British Army and British naval officers, and there's a whole thing there. But it just frustrated me that we made the choices that we made when it came to using some of the language. Now, it wasn't something that happened often, and it was like something that was pushed back against. He did a pretty decent job of making the single female character we had really well fleshed out and making her as a part of the story, making her important to it. Like, he did a decent job with that. So, like, as a historical novel, it's okay. I just... It's just very hard for me to read something like that knowing what I know. Like, one of the things that bugged me the most is that I go into this knowing that, like, while these British soldiers are ragging on these Chinese pirates for smuggling opium, like, the British Empire are the people that are enabling them. They're the ones encouraging the smuggling of this opium because it's part of how they were controlling China. I don't know. I just, like, he didn't completely ignore the colonialism, and there were places where I think he did a really good job of countering that, especially in the case of our main character, but I just, yeah, I had issues with this book that I couldn't quite get past. I have more in-depth, in-detail thoughts. I think I go into, like, more specific examples when it comes to the vlog, so again, I will have that linked down below in the description box. There is another video that is, or not video, there's another book that's going to be on from that vlog. You guys will probably be able to tell which one, which it's funny because it's higher up on this list because I don't think it's as well written, but I ended up liking that one more. The next one might have a few people unsubscribing, and again, this is, okay, so we are going to go with Foxglove by Adeline Grace. If you've watched my Goodreads Choice video where I read all of the YA fantasy from the Goodreads Choice Awards, you will probably know that you're not surprised that this is on this list. This is the second book. I have Belladonna somewhere over there. This is the second book in the Belladonna trilogy. In the first one, we are following Signet. Her parents died when she was very young, and she is the heir to a fortune. When she reaches her majority, she is going to be able to get all of that money, but until then, she needs to be cared for by various relatives, and they keep dropping dead. She believes it is the fault that, like, death is targeting her and taking down the people that have been taking care of her. Like, she's very upset about it. She's got people that she loves that just, you know, wound up dead. This was a choice. I find that I have less tolerance for this kind of idea of an immortal falling in love with a teenager. So there are situations where authors have made it clear that, like, the immortality part stopped the brain's development and this person is stuck forever as a teenager, which sounds terrible. Would not want it on, you know, wouldn't want to deal with that. There are also, like, stuff where, like, they're trapped in a small child's body, but they are an adult mentally. So, like, it really depends on the world and the world building. But this is not a situation where we're dealing with a teenager who is newly become this immortal being. We've got these two immortal beings that are in love with this, like, teenagers. My main gripe with this series, yes, there's some questionable writing. It's not the best writing I've ever read. No, I do not think that Adeline Grace has ever looked up what the actual height of a willow tree is, because that is, well, number one, that's not a tree that I would use if I was trying to describe that someone was tall, but also, the man's 30 feet tall? Okay. My biggest gripe with this series is that it would work so much better as a dark adult romance. It just would. I wasn't unhappy with, like, some of the things that were done and said, and, like, I think it's a very interesting mystery. I think that the way that she is working through these kind of murder plots that we're dealing with, like, that makes sense. But our main character starts out the series at 19. For what reason is this a YA? Why would we do that? Like, this would just work better as an adult book. The entire series, all I could think was that this author wanted to write a sexy, mysterious, dark romance. And if you want to write a sexy, mysterious, dark romance, just write it. Don't write a YA book and try to age down all of the, just write the book you want to write. I know there are people out there that love this. I know there are people who really are just suckers for the kind of retelling of the Hades and Persephone mythology. This is similar to, it's sort of, like, it's got that same vibe, but she's not like our our main character in the first book is definitely not Persephone. I understand why people I liked the mystery part. I thought that that was very interesting. I thought trying to figure out whodunit in each of the books was a very intriguing thing to do. I think that the whodunit was done a little bit better potentially in this one, but I just disagree with this fundamentally disagree with the idea that this is a YA. I think it would have been better if we had just aged the characters up a little bit. A lot of the things that I found weird and questionable and squicky would have been completely fine if we were dealing with someone who was 21, 22, 23, something like that. The next one we have is 13th Hour by Trudy Skye. This one, like I said, I enjoyed it more than A Song for the Void, and I also think that it had a place on the Spiffbo 8 list where A Song for the Void just didn't. There was not enough fantasy element in A Song for the Void, in my opinion, and this is all fantasy element. There's so much fantasy element. There's so much world building in this one. So in this, we're following two main characters whose names I cannot remember, and again, it's an ebook, but we are following one character that she is what's known as a Vesper, and we're following another character who is, it's 12 different fantasy races, and then he's part of the fantasy cops. He is an investigator, and he is investigating a thing that she is also involved in, and they're having to work together, and I love that dynamic. Some of this book really, really worked for me. They are trying to figure out what's going on with a whole bunch of things that are happening, and that's part of the problem for me in this book, because I felt like there was way too much happening in this one book that we didn't get enough time with any of the things that were happening. Some of the world building was just it was cool, but it took away from the plot and the character, and it was focused on in places that I would have preferred. It wasn't, if you've watched the vlog that this was in, that I was reading this for, you would have noticed that a great portion of the vlog is me giving critique of this book and the flaws that I thought were there. That is maybe, and I'm not even kidding, that's maybe half of what I actually had. I cut out most of it. I do actually want to continue on with the series to see if the author's able to improve, because I felt like this book didn't start until 3/4 of the way in. If I'll be honest, the real plot and everything that was happening didn't start until 3/4 of the way in, and I think that some very just simple switches around of what happened and what we were focusing on could have improved this book so much. It just was one of those things that it felt like it needed another, a really good developmental edit. There just was a lot of awkward dialogue. There were a lot of places where I'm just why are we even here? There were a lot of places where we would go down and have something set up that would be interesting, and then that thing would be a nothing burger. We spend 5 minutes there and then we're gone. As much as I liked it, I can't, it still needs to be on this list. Moving on to the next book on this list, which you probably thought that this was going to be higher. There is an entire vlog called I Read This Book So You Don't Have To, which is also my Book Fest vlog, and that is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I will be honest, I was going to read Iron Flame. I will be 100% honest, because she got me with that ending. However, she also posted some really gross stuff in regards to Palestine, apparently, on her Instagram. So I don't need to read Iron Flame. There are enough people reading and publishing vlogs and not discussing what she said on Instagram at all that I can just get whatever information I want, I can get elsewhere. This is following Violet when she was a very small child. She had a fever that affected her muscles. It is very similar to what we would know in this world as EDS, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. The author herself has that, and that is representation that I thought was pretty well done. There are some critiques about the fact that we don't see any days where our main character has 0 spoons. And I understand why people have that critique. I also understand why the author may have skipped past that for plot reasons and things like that. Sometimes you just want to write a book and you want to see somebody with what you've got being able to be a badass in spite of it. So I get that. My biggest problem with this is just that it needed another edit. There is so much in this book that kind of makes sense. It's been so long since I read this. I don't have a lot of distinct memories because none of it stuck with me. Again, there is a vlog. If you're interested in more detailed thoughts on that and more specific examples from the text, I would suggest going there, because I don't have a great memory of this book, because I read it and it was a book that I read and I didn't like it. The one thing I did like is I did like to some extent, the relationship between our main character and the love interest, the main character and her sad, pissy best friend, not so much. There was a lot of inconsistency in the writing. I thought that the beginning and the way that it just opened and the way she handles the exposition, not great. Not well done at all. There's an opening scene that she could have done something really clever with, and she decided to do something really basic. It's just so basic. I was just like, these could have been really fun, cool Easter eggs that you put there, but no, we're just reciting the history of this world. Okay, there's a lot that doesn't make sense that I was like, okay, I have a feeling that this is going to be addressed later. There's a lot that doesn't make sense that I was like, what? But this doesn't make sense. It also is straight up military propaganda, and also kind of not trad wife, but it's very, I don't know how to explain this to anyone who has not been in evangelical culture and in kind of like the purity culture that I grew up in, but it is very steeped in the ideas of Christ and his bride. Like, you do the best you can, but at the end of the day, you do need a big, strong man to come in and save you. Like, it's very hard because there's a line between having something where you're showing a supportive partner, because when you're dealing with disabilities, when you're dealing with chronic illness, like, it is really encouraging and important to show people in that person's life being supportive and fighting for them. And so, like, I don't know where that line is, but there was a specific scene where I was like, oh, I see where we're going with this. I see what I could see, like, I could hear the sermons in my head as this thing clicked into place. I can't explain it any better than that without fully spoiling it or going back to find that specific scene, and I am not rereading this book for one scene. I'm sorry, I'm not. I did like the dragons, though. The dragons were fun. I love grumpy old man dragons and wizards and things like that. So if you are looking, like, it's one of those things that you can definitely, it's something that you're going to go through very quickly. You're going to want to know what happens next. It is, again, not the best written thing, but I do think that it is very entertaining writing. Again, I don't suggest supporting Rebecca Yarros. I just don't think it's a good idea. You know, she's up there with, like, Sarah J. Maas for me now. But I can't stop you. I know there are going to be people watching this video that are like, you just put Fourth Wing on there because you disagree with the author's politics. And no, this book was going to be on this list regardless. I knew it when I read it. I knew it. So, apologies if you liked the book. I get why it was a fun read. I just wasn't a good one. This next one is a book that I did for my reading books to see if Taylor Swift has taste. And this was a bad book to choose to see if Taylor Swift had taste, because if I was to go by this book, I would say no. That book is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. This, I think, is like the original Manic Pixie Dream Girl book. I've seen books that came in later that did it better. Following a kid named Leo in this book, and this girl named Stargirl comes to school and kind of shakes things up. She has been homeschooled, and we're going to have a caveat about that later, but she has been homeschooled, and this is her first time really interacting in a public school, and she's just a very, like, quirky, hippie kind of girl, and it's following our main character's kind of obsession with her, and then, like, the way that she affects the people in the school when she comes in. Like I said, I have seen this concept done so much better. Paper Towns by John Green does this concept so much better. Basically, what we're doing is we're challenging this idea that the main character has built up for this Stargirl in his head. But we don't, I just, like, with this book, a book is short, I just don't think we really get into it very well. My main beef with this book was that she was homeschooled, and that is the reason why she is weird and does some of these things. And if you don't know, hi, my name is Margaret. I was homeschooled for every grade except half of kindergarten and first grade, and I never would have done some of the things that she does in this book because I would have realized that that is crossing a social boundary. Like, she has zero concept of social boundaries, of, like, people, like, how some stuff might be intrusive, and I just, like, that's not quirky, it's just inconsiderate, in my opinion. The heart was there, the idea was there, but it also was like, I'm like, this, if someone were doing this with me that I did not know, who just come into my school, I would be very uncomfortable with it, and I would not be cool with it. I had a problem with that. And I had a problem with Mr. Spinelli, with Jerry Spinelli, writing someone who, because it's just a complete misunderstanding of, like, homeschoolers in general. And I will, there are some weird homeschoolers out there. You're kind of on the fringe of that, probably. But, like, we still learned social cues. We still learned, like, just being within your family, you learn things like boundaries. And it felt like this girl had no boundaries. And it annoyed the heck out of me. I'm going to piss off some of my manga lovers. I apologize in advance, but what's going to be said needed to be said. This is probably, for reasons that I will get into, the worst, like, the number one book on this list is not the worst written book I've ever read. This one probably is the one that I would say is the worst written on this list, and that is Soul Eater Volume 1 by Atsushi Okubo. I will give you the caveat of this does get a little bit better when we get, like, we've gone back and forth and with what some of my issues are. It gets better as we go further into the series. I'm on Volume 4 now. We saw a resurgence of some of my issues that I'm going to talk about in this book in Volume 4, but I have been told that we do end up with a lot more nuance, and I will say that, like, our main character is a really interesting, fleshed out main character for a female main character being written by, I think it's a man? I'm not entirely sure. We're following Maka. She is a Meister, and basically in this world, it's a very odd, weird fantasy world where you have these Meisters that their job is to go and collect rogue souls, and then they have these sentient weapons. So we have Maka, and her weapon is a scythe soul. She's trying to level him up to a point where he could be the weapon for Death himself. Like, Death is actually a character in this series. It's very interesting, but this didn't work well for me. Number one, from a plot perspective, this is what you'll see happen with a lot of manga, is you'll have various vignettes at the beginning of the series, and they won't quite have an overarching plot to connect them just yet. It's just moments with these characters as we're getting to know them, getting to know the world. I've seen it done better in manga. I just have seen that have a little bit more of a through line with our characters. This is just, we're seeing, like, there was nothing connecting these except that it's in the same world. From a writing standpoint, I think that could have been handled a little bit better. My biggest issue with this volume in particular is, number one, the objectification of, like, they're super objectified. Like, it just frustrated me that one chapter we're having so much, like, just unnecessary objectification of women. Like, with the exception of Maka, most of our female characters, many of them which are weapons as well, they're part of these sentient weapons because we've got multiple people who are these Meisters, just annoyed me to no end. The other thing is that I feel that this series treats the sexual assault of young boys, it treats it like a joke. There are multiple instances in this volume and also in another volume where, like, we have an adult female character smush a teenage boy's face into her boobs. The fact that our society normalizes that and treats it as a joke and as something that's funny when it is in fact sexual assault. Like, it doesn't stop being sexual assault because it's a boy having that done to him. And there are going to be people that are like, oh my god, you have to take into context who the audience is going to be. And my response to that is, we should teach our boys better. That is my response. Naruto was able to do this with far less objectification of women and a far less of, like, if I remember correctly, sexual assault of our main character. I did go to talk with someone, my brother, who has read it, and he said it gets better. Especially when it comes, like, he's like, it's really worth it reading it for Maka because she is one of the most nuanced and well-developed female characters that he's seen in manga. And this number one is here because it is the most disappointing book on this list. It's the most disappointing book that I've read all year. And that really hurts because book one in this series is going to be on the best of list. But I was just left completely frustrated by this book, completely flummoxed as to why the author, what happened between book one and book two for what was such a very interesting, fast-paced, like, plot that had me on the edge of my seat was turned into just this slog. That book's going to be These Infinite Threads. I'm not going to get into what this book is about because, again, this is going to be, I'm going to talk about what the first book is about in my best of list. I'm just going to tell you what my problems were with it. I will say part of this is probably a me and Tahara Mafi just not being right for each other. Because I have a feeling that she is an author who likes to build one relationship in the first book and then completely change it around in the next book based on what I know from this and what I know from Shatter Me. Like, there are very few times that I've been okay with, like, okay, we're going to develop and build this whole thing, and then we're going to change the entire course of what this character is doing and who this character is interested in being with in the next book. And I get that people do that. I don't want to read it. That's just kind of the way that I am. It's why I stopped watching Grey's Anatomy, too. I mean, I stopped watching Grey's Anatomy because Grey's Anatomy went on for far too long. The other thing is that the plot of this book is non-existent. Like, we spend the majority of this book going back and forth between our two point of view characters while they are having conversations that happen over a single day. The pacing of this book is just so off. We did not get into what the actual plot of this book was until the last, I would say, 50 pages, and that was only in one of the points of view. The other point of view, it was just two characters sniping at each other the entire time. I think the entire thing happens over 48 hours, and you can use a 48-hour timeline to really make a interesting and, like, intense plot. She does that in the first book, but nothing. I don't understand. Like, I was so frustrated reading this because I was waiting for us to get somewhere where things are moving forward, and it just kept being conversations and things nothing happened. Like, stuff happened, but nothing happened, and I was so frustrated by that. Like, I loved This Woven Kingdom. I thought it was amazing. I thought that it was just fantastic, and the way that she had the pacing done in This Woven Kingdom was perfect. I don't understand. This is another one that I read for the Goodreads Choice Awards. Another one that I got more in-depth thoughts there. I don't understand. I don't know why Tahira Mafi likes doing this to me. I would not have picked up, I mean, I would have had to pick up the series because of the video that I did, but, like, just, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to finish it. I don't know if I'm going to finish the series because I'm so frustrated and angry and like, just dreading knowing. And here's the thing. This secondary relationship, if we had had that character earlier on in the first book and had some of that building and built some of that tension, I could have been into it, but we don't start building that tension until halfway through book 2. Like, I feel like she did a better job with the Shatter Me series when it comes to building the tension between the main character and who's going to end up being the main love interest for the series. And I hated that relationship. So, I don't hate this one. I just think it was poorly done. I think I still ended up giving us 3 stars because, like, it is from a prose, if you look at the prose level, what's going on, it is good. But if you look at it from a plot level and from a romance level, it is not my cup of tea at all. And I was just, like, so excited to be getting to this. And it just, like, broke my heart that I did not like it as much as I liked the first book. So that is the tea. Those are my least favorite books of 2023. How angry did I make you? I know there are people in my audience that are probably very annoyed that I didn't like some of those books. And I'm sorry, they just, I can't live, like, I understand people do not go into most books with the level of knowledge when it comes to writing that I do, but, like, I can't turn the part of my brain that's done multiple creative writing classes and spent 10 years writing. I can't turn that part of my brain off. It just doesn't work that way. And that is something that definitely eats into my enjoyment of book, especially when I see, like, an idea that I think could have been a really interesting idea or done really well, and then the execution is just, I would love to know what was your least favorite book of 2023. I always am very interested to see, like, what did my audience dislike? Should I read it and see? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, if you enjoyed this video, I'll have other videos over here. When it is up, I will have my best books of 2023 up there, but for now, it'll just be whatever my most recent video is. And then right down here, I will have something that YouTube thinks you should watch particularly. That is it for now, my friends. Happy reading, and I will see you later when we will talk about more wordy, nerdy things. Bye! I just fell behind, and then there was so much to catch up on it, but then the decision was made when certain characters were killed off. Because why would I go back Why would I go back to watch that when that sadness is waiting for me? I'm not interested in that. Thank you. Bye. Grey's Anatomy should have ended 10 seasons ago. I'm sorry.